Have you ever stumbled across a story online that hits you so hard it doesn't even feel like just some random post? Today I was scrolling through Reddit and found a few stories like that. Way too real, way too creepy to ignore. I've got a feeling you're going to want to hear these. So, no more waiting, let's dive right in.
Story 1.
I'm debuting as an idol soon. Born in South Korea, I wanted to be an idol ever since I was a kid. Luckily, one of the top talent agencies was secretly scouting for a multi-gender, English-speaking group to rival new gen groups like Stray Kids and New Jeans. I've been a fan of the older groups since I was young. My mom was a huge fan of older gen groups like Big Bang and Girls' Generation, so they were always on TV when I was a kid. BTS, Blackpink, etc. I grew up in the US obsessed with them. When we moved to the US, I took dance classes every week to improve myself. After graduating high school, I planned to move to Korea to stay with relatives. If things didn't work out, I'd head back to the US. Now, at 25, I know that's considered old for an idol. I'm still not sure how I made it through. I auditioned because it was my dream, but I wasn't expecting anything to really come out of it. I mean, my singing and dancing was subpar, and I barely met the beauty standard. I remember the audition was cruel. The judges were too honest. They weren't judging people. These guys were insulting them. Overweight, disgusting, pig, terrible. I almost walked out. Twice. However, my group all managed to pass without even performing. There were 4 of us, thankfully in my age range, early to mid-20s. I'm going to be substituting names due to NDAs in place. Min, a bubbly singer from Thailand. He was really into animals. His whole camera roll was his dog from back home. Min was sweet. Jay, the youngest, a scowling British guy who brought a book to read while we were waiting. Initially, I thought he was an asshole, especially when he ignored others' attempts to talk to him, shooing them away with an uncomfortable look. But he was just really, really awkward. When he actually started talking, Jay, unintentionally, made me laugh. His icebreaker with me was, I haven't left my room since I graduated college. I laughed, but he looked pretty serious. Then he went off on a weird tangent about League of Legends. I didn't know what that was, but he seemed really into it. Finally, there was Winnie, an Australian model, who arrived late. But because of her looks, she was the one receiving apologies. I watched as fully grown men insisted on grabbing her, telling her how beautiful she was. Winnie had a resting bitch face, so I immediately kept my distance. But when she came over and introduced herself, I found myself unable to stop talking to her. She spoke like she was on fast forward, but that was what made her endearing. Winnie had no idea the whole room was staring at her, and only her. Men seemed intrigued by her, the 2 of them immediately connecting. Jay gave her a wave, offering his seat, since there were none left. I keep thinking back. Was it fate that we all met beforehand? There were around 200 people auditioning, and out of them, only the 4 of us got through. It's not like we had connections. I was from a relatively poor background. Min and Jay had part-time jobs to survive, and Winnie was walking around with holes in her shoes. All of us were, and still are, unknown. I kept going through it in my head. How do we pass? What made us better than others? To put it simply, lookism. Korea is obsessed with beauty. They didn't see our talent. I don't even think they wanted talent. They saw faces they could endorse and capitalize on. At the time, I wasn't complaining. It was a compliment. It's nice to be called pretty. Jay was admittedly gorgeous. His accent was the icing on the cake. Min had boyish charm and a baby face I knew would sell. Winnie was self-explanatory. Whenever the 4 of us entered the room, all eyes were on her. Our looks had already sailed us through, and I don't think I believed it was happening for a while. It only fully hit me when we began training, and as a trainee, I came to realize there was no such thing as eating. I thought it was just junk food initially, which was understandable. Mom sent chips and candy in a huge comfort package for all of us to share, only for our manager to trash it right in front of us. I don't mean she threw it away or confiscated it. I mean she dumped the package in a trash can and set fire to it. No, I'm not joking. So no junk food. I can understand that to an extent. During my first month as a trainee, I counted almost 15 times a food item had been snatched from my hands, and it wasn't even bad food. I was eating carrots and celery sticks to keep me going, and the next thing I know, the bag is in the trash, and I'm being forced to my feet to complete 100 push-ups. It wasn't just me. Jay made the mistake of eating a candy bar. I had zero idea where he'd gotten it from. The guy managed one singular bite before he choked on the rest. Under the pretense of he's choking, the candy bar was taken off him. I wasn't sure if it was Jay's failure to chew or the K-pop gods sending down their wrath. He had to get it back after it had melted and re-hardened in our dance instructor's pocket and was basically fucking inedible. We shared an apartment, and the refrigerator was empty. When Min attempted to go grocery shopping, he was stopped in the middle of the street. We did end up devising a plan when lack of food was becoming a problem. By problem, I mean if we didn't get something sustainable into us, we were going to go fucking crazy. I was already highly irate. I couldn't concentrate on training because all I could think about was food. Jay, who had a short fuse, was argumentative, getting into fights with 2 dance instructors. His behavior was completely out of character, and it was because the guy hadn't eaten anything in days. Conveniently, training sessions ran through lunch, and all we were allowed was a limp-looking salad with a grand total of 3 lettuce leaves. There were no carbs, no real vegetables or dressing, or anything to at least keep us going until dinner. So, I drove half an hour in a random direction to get management off of our tail. The plan was to buy as much food as possible and smuggle it in a storage container only we knew the code to. I don't mean buying candy and chips and shit that will screw up our health. I mean healthy home-cooked meals that we could survive on. However, the second I jumped out of my car in front of a community-owned store, our manager was standing in front of me. He was gentle, offering me a candy bar, like I was a fucking child. But he did usher me into his car, not so subtly locking me in. According to him and his higher-ups, we were deemed the most visually captivating group. Min stood tall and athletic, his handsome features sculpted to perfection. Jay possessed a flawless jawline that drew attention effortlessly, while Winnie's figure was described as a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. I was told my eyes were what sold me. I could entertain a crowd just by looking at them. I could captivate a whole concert hall. Eating meant piling on weight, and weight meant failure. Still, though, whatever excuses he had didn't stop us from eating at every opportunity we had. Waking up every single day with an empty stomach, dragging ourselves to training, and eating 3 lettuce leaves was unsurprisingly putting a toll on us. We got into fights over the tiniest inconveniences. Min tore my head off because I used his body wash by accident. Jay and Winnie had an argument over who was using the sofa bed after 24 straight hours of grueling training, where we were allowed one single 5-minute break. Min and Jay got into heated arguments over stupid shit that didn't even matter. I ripped Winnie's head off when she used my toothbrush. 6 months in, Winnie tried to leave. I can't do this. She broke down to us one morning, and we were her support network. I hugged her, and the boys joined in, wrapping her into a comfortable cocoon. Korea called Winnie beautiful, healthy, glowing. I had another word for it. When she tried to leave the training room, the girl was gently apprehended, and when she asked our manager for something other than salad, he gave in and ordered a child-sized bowl of rice. Winnie ate like an animal. The rest of us watched her, ravenous. I was exhausted, insatiably fucking hungry, and losing my mind. I would not regret tearing it out of her hands and eating it myself. Training was becoming more demanding, and we were starting to lose our minds a bit. It felt like we were slipping into a Lord of the Flies scenario. There was a strict rule against intimacy with fellow group members. One night at 3 a.m., I stumbled upon the others in an awkward threesome on the couch. Exhausted and possibly hallucinating from hunger, I didn't think much of it. The next day, at a later time of 4 a.m., after another 15-hour grueling training session, I found myself collapsing onto the couch with them. And one thing led to another. I ended up joining in. We talked about it, each of us agreeing it was nice. But there was no way we could continue something so special while we were trainees. There reached a point when my manager's words were no longer registering. I awoke every day at 5 a.m., after 3 hours of sleep. I went over choreography until my body was aching, my thoughts reduced to mush. But I always had one goal in mind. Debut. I was stopped in the middle of the street by a kind woman who told me I was beautiful. She hugged me and gave me 2 granola bars. I ate the first one so fast, I couldn't even remember the taste. I saved the rest to share with the others. I had to try to share it. My group mates were barely coherent after we were forced to repeat the choreography 26 times because Jay kept stumbling. It wasn't that he was a bad dancer. He was too tired. We were all so fucking tired. When I showed them the food, they barely reacted. I wasn't expecting the higher-ups to enter the studio when I was pulling apart the bar and offering pieces to them. Our manager didn't snatch it away, thankfully. I ate that fucking granola bar right in his face. However, he did extend training by 3 hours. I wasn't the only one struggling. Min was losing color in his cheeks due to lack of sleep, and somehow it was his fault. Min didn't even eat salad after that. Instead, while we were all eating our 3 allocated lettuce leaves, he went to the gym. In his words, "I'm going to work off all of the calories." What calories? Somehow, keeping to the diet actually paid off. We were set to debut. Not publicly, but in front of the industry higher-ups. The night before, however, we decided to treat ourselves. McDonald's. I suggested it when our manager went out to dinner. For once, he wasn't stalking us, and neither were his entourage of guards. I ate 2 triple cheeseburgers and 3 helpings of fries. Winnie downed 4 burgers, somehow, and 2 sodas. The guys were hesitant at first, but once they started eating, they couldn't stop. I had never seen them so happy, and at that moment I actually felt like a normal person. Afterwards, we grabbed drinks and snacks, constantly looking over our shoulder to see if we were being followed. We were not. So, when we got back to the apartment, we indulged in soda and chips. I went to sleep happy and full for the first time in months. It's crazy how good a proper meal can make you feel. I was woken up, however, maybe a few hours later, to violent retching. Jay, it's not out of the ordinary for a trainee to wake up to vomiting. It's pretty normal for trainees to purge at night and then get rid of any evidence. That is what I figured was happening. But I could hear him crying, his sobs echoing down the hallway. After a while of sitting up in bed, half aware of my muddled thoughts and a sharp pain in my lower gut, Winnie stumbled into my room, hysterical. "It's Jay," she shrieked, in the dull glow of my bedroom lamp. Her cheeks were sickly white. "There's something wrong with him." Winnie covered her mouth suddenly, before she threw up all over herself. I could hear Min choking in the hallway. Coughing quickly morphed into barfing. Food poisoning, I thought, my own stomach lurching. I could taste it, a sudden rotten slime slowly inching up my throat. Surely, it was the fast food we ate. Those burgers. They did taste weird, but I thought it was just like spicy mayo. I didn't make it to the bathroom, dropping to my knees and spewing through my hands. Whatever it was, whatever we had, did not agree with us. I had body aches that made it impossible to move, to even breathe. The next 24 hours were horrific. I spent the entire time running backwards and forwards to and from the bathroom, crashing into the others like a fucking cartoon. I couldn't keep anything down. Bottled water just came back up, tea and honey, Gatorade, even anti-sickness meds. I was delirious, hot and cold, and then somehow not feeling at all. I passed out on the bathroom floor, my legs entangled with Min. He muttered something along the lines of lawsuit, because those burgers had made us really fucking sick. At some point, I was in the shower, trying to cool myself off. But I was so hot. Lost we you it. Min was singing, half delirious, curled into a ball. Lawsuit. Fucking lawwit. His voice felt like a pickaxe knocking against my skull. Min, Jay's voice was a relief. I thought he was unconscious. Shut the fuck up. But it's a lawsuit. I heard something hit the wall behind Min. Maybe a book from Jay's direction. Min's delirious chanting of lawsuit came to an end. The shower was too hot. Then it was too cold. And then it was burning my skin. I felt like my skin was peeling off, my blood boiling in my veins, my brain coming apart. It was like being set alight. I was half conscious. I only remember tripping over Min's outstretched legs, triggering a far weaker, mumbled lawsuit. I collapsed into bed, my body twisting and contorting. It didn't feel like a virus or even gastritis. I was barely conscious sitting on the side of my bed when I sneezed something into my hands, choking up chunks of deep, dark red. Jay was on the floor and Winnie was on the ceiling. I didn't remember eating anything red. I stared at the gloopy red lumps trickling down my palm. It wasn't food. I had already brought up the entire contents of my gut. This was too warm. It was lumpy and bright, staining my hands. All of it. I want you to bring up everything, Sonny. The voice came from behind me. Something was behind me. I could see its inhuman, bulging shadow. I felt its slimy, wet fingers rubbing circles on my back. Do you want to be an idol? The thing demanded, its tongue flicking out, licking my neck. It's hungry. It wants to eat. It wants to feast. The voice dropped into a monstrous snarl. I could feel warm saliva pooling down my neck. Will you feed it? I think in my state, I screamed yes. The others echoed my cry. I found myself repeating his words, the others joining in sync. You do not need to eat. You need to feed it. We do not. Breathe. Sleep. Think. We feed it. It. That dripped from the walls in every corner. Masses of writhing flesh closing in on us, gnawing mouths twitching wider and wider. Its voice inside my head demanded more. It wanted more. It wanted a feast. Min was slumped into the wall, opposite me, his head hanging, half-lidded eyes glued to what poured from the walls, what was swallowing us up. Jay was gone, his body devoured by writhing mounds of flesh. Red, slithering amalgamations spilling into the room, swallowing Winnie whole. It looked like the inside of a human being, without the skin. It told me not to be afraid. But I was already scrambling back on my hands and knees, watching it chew through my friends, merciless slimy mounds ripping through their flesh. Its breath, hot and sticky, curled against the back of my neck, and I think I gave up. I pressed my cheek to the cold bathroom tiles and curled in on myself. I let it seep through the door, let it spill into my mouth and nose, filling my lungs, stealing my breath, stealing my will to breathe. I can't remember anything after that, except waking up, covered in warm slime, slick on my arms and legs, already hardening between my fingers. I tried to push through, but I couldn't move, half aware of my body contorting beneath me. I lay there for hours, watching Min's arm break through hardened, crystallized slime. I could see Jay, or what was left of him, poking from a bulging mass of flesh. I didn't feel sick anymore. I didn't feel anything. The sheer exhaustion and fear sent me into a deep sleep. Min woke me up with a sheepish smile, but his eyes were hollow. Sunlight was pouring through the windows, and he was already dressed for the day. Crazy dream, right? He laughed a little too hard and ran back to the bathroom. But it wasn't a fever dream. If it was, we wouldn't have shared the same one. I could still see the markings on his arm, where it had consumed him head to toe. I pointed them out, and he just shrugged, smiling, saying, I probably slept weird. Neither of us wanted to say the obvious. Those markings on his arm were fingers. I had them too. A doctor came to see our group, diagnosing us with food poisoning. But I'm pretty sure food poisoning can't cause significant changes to appearance. The boys were somehow glowing, their figures too perfect, almost surreal, like looking in a fun mirror. Min's baby face was exactly what they wanted, as if it had been meticulously structured and molded. Jay looked ethereal, but beauty like him shouldn't exist. Yet somehow it didn't idols. It was forced beauty, manufactured and tailored beauty that wasn't natural, wasn't normal. Jay was already pretty. He already met the beauty standard. So why did they insist on turning him into this? Into someone I barely recognized? Winnie was too thin, to the point of looking like a fragmented reflection. Her skin was so pale, sickly, and lacking color. My eyes were no longer my only defining features. I had a body that moved gracefully, allowing me to twist it to fit any choreography. I forced down a cupcake and threw it back up. I tried water to wash out my mouth and threw that up too. This wasn't happening. That's what I kept telling myself. There was no way my body was just rejecting everything. I went crazy as soon as I figured out I couldn't keep down anything I ate. Pasta, bread, meals, noodles, soda, nothing. When I managed to stuff something down my throat, my stomach immediately revolts. It's not just appearances that have changed. The others are acting weird, like they're permanently high. Personalities, too. Jay has switched from an awkward guy with a friendly smile who I'd grown to love to someone who wouldn't even look at you if you weren't on his level. Min brought a girl home 3 nights ago, but I didn't see/hear her leave at any point. I asked him before training, and he just shrugged with a clueless smile. She stayed for dinner. I nodded slowly, suddenly conscious of him talking about dinner, which meant he was eating. Why didn't you invite the rest of us? I asked, dumping my backpack on the ground next to his. What did you guys have to eat anyway? Just food, he said, shooting me a grin. His cryptic behavior was starting to drive me crazy. Okay, so what food? Min didn't answer, only pressing a finger to his lips with a smirk and dancing away. Are you guys dating? I asked, waiting for his snort. His laugh was more of an ironic sputter. Trainees can't date. He's gotten really good at dancing, almost to the point of it looking inhuman. Min's backflips are effortless, his body moving like flowing water. I stayed at the studio late that night and made my way home around midnight. When I pushed through the door, Min and Jay were in the kitchen. Winnie was on the couch. Ego surfing, probably. She can't do it publicly yet, so Winnie scrolls through what fellow trainees are saying on our share group chat. The girl offered me a quiet greeting, her gaze glued to her phone. Since our manager finally let us have our phones back, my friend hasn't let go of hers. She was a little bit too obsessed with others' opinions. After being named the face of our group, Winnie wanted to keep it that way. Hey, Sonny, Min shouted from the kitchen. Jay sat on the countertop, swinging his legs, his eyes glued to the pan. Do you want to see what I'm cooking? I nodded. Curious, I headed over to what was bubbling away in the crock pot. Meat. Min leaned close, and I caught a smear of tomato sauce on his shirt. Smells good, huh? It did. I couldn't keep a smile off of my face. Beef stew, I figured. There were dumplings and vegetables to go with it. We all sat down, and I ate something real for the first time in weeks. It was perfectly chewy and melted in my mouth. And the best part? I didn't throw it back up. In fact, I was hungry for more. So hungry, in fact, that I decided to grab leftovers when the others were training. By now, my mouth was watering. I could still taste this stew. It was the best thing I had ever eaten. It felt almost nostalgic, like a home-cooked meal from back home. I wanted more. However, the refrigerator was empty, bar a few cans of beer and some old cheese I remember managing to smuggle through a mutual friend. I did try the cheese in a sandwich, only to find myself choking it back up. The only thing I could eat was Min's stew. I figured maybe he was hiding some in his room. That was my half-delirious thought process. But I didn't find beef stew. Instead, under his bed was what was left of the girl he'd brought home. Her severed head stared up with vacant, lifeless eyes. The jagged edges of her neck bore the marks of a saw, the flesh uneven and raw. Pieces of her body were meticulously wrapped in plastic, blood pooling through clear sheeting, staining it deep dark red. Her limbs were bound together like butchered meat. The smell was overwhelming, choking my senses. I wrenched back, stumbled out of the room, and slammed the door. I called the cops, but halfway through the call, my phone cut off. Every time I try to talk to our manager, he pushes me away. It's always, not now, Sonny, or can this wait? When I went back to Min's room, the body was gone. There was more beef stew that night. I stayed in my room, despite my growling stomach. I stood next to Min on the practice stage yesterday, and I'm terrified of him. This man is going to debut at some point. This fucking monster. His teeth are too sharp, pricking through a wide grin. I fucking swore he was drooling, saliva seeping down his chin. I caught him smirk at a girl in the audience. But Winnie and Jay aren't much better. I've caught Jay dragging guys backstage during small concerts, and Winnie disappears all night. She comes back with guys, pulling them into her room. I can't stop thinking about that girl's body disappearing. Min keeps making beef stew, and the more I eat it, the hungrier I become. But every time I eat, I throw up. What the fuck is wrong with me? Min brought home another girl today. I can hear her laughing. I can smell her. Her perfume is so fucking strong, I can't think straight. I'm going crazy. Sometimes I lose track of myself. I'm here sitting in bed, and then I'm halfway down the hallway, and her voice is in my head, like cymbals crashing in my skull. I can't get her smell out of my head. Music is helping so far, but I don't know how long I can deal with this. I'm so hungry. I'm eating chips right now, but they're not staying down. I keep blacking out. I blink, and then I've somehow moved. I'm further down the hallway, my head trapped in fog. Jay joined me last time, his vacant eyes glued to the lounge door. He caught my eye and winked. I think he's waiting for something. There was a predatory, territorial look in his eyes. I think he's waiting for the girl's laughter to stop. Jay, Min, Winnie, all of them scare me. I'm terrified of myself. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Every passing day, the people that once felt like family are morphing into strangers. Monsters. I caught Min looking in the mirror last night. He pulled his shirt off, and his back was stretched like his skin was hanging off. Jay didn't seem to mind. He just grabbed a pair of scissors, cutting off the excess. Then he ran his fingers down his perfect, sculpted body, his lips breaking into a grin. I'm not allowed a lock on my door, so I've pushed my bed against it, barricading myself in my room. So far, I think I'm okay. Please, if you're an Idol fan, stay away from us when we debut. Don't come near any of us. Just stay away from idols in general, for your own safety, because I think the others want to feed it.
Story 2.
I backpack around the country. Sometimes I catch a ride with the occasional semi-driver, but mostly I walk. Everything I need is strapped to my back, and I live simply. Most of the time, it's a good life. That's not to say there aren't downsides. I've been mugged a couple of times, spent nights shivering myself to sleep, and been chased off by crotchety old farmers, sometimes at gunpoint. Lately, I've been drifting through Nebraska and Iowa, where the cornfields stretch on forever, rustling in the breeze. I take meals where I can, and I'm not above scavenging from the trash. I was digging through one such dumpster when I heard the distant crackle of thunder. The storm had been building all afternoon, the sky bruising at the edges, thick clouds swallowing the last hints of sunlight. When the first droplets hit, cold and sharp, I knew I'd be walking through a downpour soon if I didn't find shelter. I took a back road. No cars passed, just telephone lines, cattle, and fences. That's when I saw it, far across an empty stretch of land, past the buck and pole fences and the swaying thistles. A house, dark and silent, its windows boarded over like lidded eyes. Beyond it, set further back from the road, stood a barn. Peeling red paint, roof sagging at one corner, its wide doors slightly ajar. Something about it made me stop. Maybe the way the last of the light caught on the slanted roof. Maybe the way the shadows pooled too thickly around the entrance. I hesitated. The storm was moving in fast. Wind picked up, whipping through the fields, hissing through the stalks of dead grass. I could keep walking, hope to find shelter somewhere else, but I didn't want to stay in the house. I knew that much. The barn seemed like the safer bet. Lightning split the sky. The rain came harder, soaking through my jacket. The fence was easy to slip through, the mud sucking at my boots as I crossed the field. The house loomed as I passed it, its presence heavy, watching. The barn doors creaked as I pushed them open. The smell hit me first, damp hay, old wood, something else underneath. Something sour. Inside, it was darker than I expected. The rain on the metal roof echoed, hollow and rhythmic, a sound I normally found comforting. But here, it felt different, deeper, like it was coming from beneath the floor. I hesitated, scanning the space. Empty stalls, a gutted tractor half buried in the shadows. Loose hay scattered across the dirt. No signs of life. I climbed into the loft, keeping my back to the wall as I unrolled my sleeping bag. The storm raged outside, wind howling through the cracks in the barn walls. I fell into a tangled sleep. A sound jolted me awake. Something rattling in the distance, back near the house. I crept out of my sleeping bag and climbed down the groaning ladder. I flicked the light on and stepped outside. The hail still peppered me as I crossed the stretch toward the house. Behind it, a set of storm cellars sat against the ground. One of the doors, thrashed up and down, caught in the wind. The basement beyond churned my stomach, the stench of decay thick and cloying as it wafted up. One door remained intact while the other hung open, a splintered board jutting from its frame, jagged nails protruding like teeth where they had once held it shut. They had secured both doors in place, yet now one gaped open, the barrier broken. A tingle of doubt crept through me as I wondered if the doors had been forced from within or if the wind had somehow torn them loose. But the damage was too deliberate, too heavy. Something with weight had done this. I liked this place less and less. Being this close to the house made my skin crawl, though I couldn't put my finger on why. Then I heard it, a rattle at the barn doors behind me, where all my belongings were. I turned. One of the red barn doors quivered like a lip, hanging slightly farther open than I'd left it. Another trick of the wind, I told myself. But this place, it felt like stepping into the wrong part of a bad neighborhood. The kind with pit bulls chained up in front yards, where furniture sat on the lawn. The kind where a wrong turn could get you mugged. The feeling sank into my gut like teeth. And yet, there wasn't another soul for miles. And I didn't have any other choice. I walked back toward the barn, flashlight in hand. Then I saw them. Footprints, bare feet in the mud, long toenails trailing deep into the earth. The prints led toward the barn. I traced them back with my light. They came from the storm cellar. I needed to grab my things and leave. I pulled the barn door back and shone my light inside. The hinges groaned. The beam of my flashlight cut through the gloom. A woman stood with her back to me. Hail clung to the greasy strands of her gray hair. Her clothes hung loose and ragged, sleeves torn, fabric stiff with old stains. That you? Her voice cracked, rasping through a throat that sounded raw. Slowly, she turned. Her movements were wrong, too stiff, like she wasn't used to them. Her face was a mask of sunken gray lines. Patches of hair were missing, exposing smooth, pale scalp. The sockets where her eyes had been were hollow and wet. Her thin lips, shriveled and gray like dried sardines, barely pulled back enough to reveal teeth like worn tombstones. She sucked at the air, a wet, rattling whistle. I stood frozen. My heart thundered. My brain refused to process what I was seeing. She took a staggered step forward. Her dress, torn to shreds, slipped from her shoulders. A sagging breast peeked through, hollow where the nipple should have been. The flesh was gnawed, as if something had chewed on her. Large teeth marks sank deep into the skin. I backed away, slow, pulse hammering in my throat. She walked with a hitch, her torso lifting too much with each step, one hand clutching her chest like she was holding herself together. My backpedaling led me to the barn doors. And then I felt it. Meaty fingers hooked into my shoulder, cold as marble, stiff but strong. The grip was steady, not yanking, not shoving, just holding me in place, something testing my weight. My breath caught. "If it ain't Ben," she murmured, lips barely forming the words. Voice thick with something rotten, something wet. Then we got a trespasser. The stench rolled over the back of my neck like heat off a carcass left too long in the sun. It clung to my skin, bloated, heavy with something rotten. My stomach twisted, while crept at my throat. I didn't dare turn my head. She took another step forward, unsteady, shivering like something barely holding together. But I knew what was pressing into my lower back now. 3 dull points, nudging at my spine. A pitchfork, not yet breaking skin, but promising the possibility. "It's me," I blurted throat tight. "It's Ben." She stopped, listened. The rattling hail filled the space between us, drumming hollow against the barn roof. "Don't sound like Ben." Her jaw hung slack, words thick, like she was rolling them around before spitting them out. The fingers on my shoulder tightened. The pitchfork pressed in a fraction more. I swallowed. "It's me. I'm just under the weather." The lie tumbled out dry, weak. She cocked her head, sniffing the air like she could smell the truth. Those empty sockets, slick and glistening, twitched slightly as if searching for me. Her face was unreadable, but I felt the shift in her posture, the hesitation, the way she leaned in just slightly, considering. The silence stretched too long. My pulse throbbing. The grip on my shoulder didn't loosen. Finally, she exhaled, slow and deliberate. "Let's get inside, then." Her voice scraped against the air. Her tongue flicked out, pale pocked with holes, slick as a worm, tasting the space between us. The hand peeled away from my shoulder, slow and deliberate. The prongs of the pitchfork scraped against the dirt floor, dragging just enough to make my skin crawl. The weight of it lingered, a quiet, unspoken threat. I turned, and he was there, a looming figure in a rotting wool coat, the fabric sagging with filth. His frame still carried the ghost of old strength, though his flesh had turned pale, slack, lifeless. His eyes were gone, dark, yawning sockets. Loose skin hung from his neck in ragged strips, peeling like the rind of an overripe orange. His breath wheezed through the moist, ruined tunnel of his trachea. In the dim glow of my flashlight, I caught glimpses of raw, pulpy layers beneath the gaps in his flesh. His hair, like hers, was patchy and thin, matted with filth. A dampness clung to him, something that brought to mind a corpse hauled from the sea, something that had no business moving anymore. They led me toward the house. When she stumbled past me to take the lead, I caught a glimpse of gleaming bone through the raw nest of her scalp. The air thickened with the smell of old death. My fists clenched. My knuckles burned white. Fear had taken root in my stomach, deep, and it was starting to bloom. There was no one for miles. No one to hear me scream. I had no choice. So I followed them into the storm cellar, my feet dragging. My grip tightened around the flashlight. The walls were damp with black mold, sagging in places, water streaking down in thin trails. The lumbering figure thumped down the steps behind me, still gripping the pitchfork. His gaping mouth worked at the air. She hobbled forward. The room was lined with broken down shelves, rusted cans scattered across the floor. A folding table sat in the middle, for chairs slid into place around it. Thunder rumbled outside. The man turned and pulled the storm shutters closed, plunging the room into suffocating darkness. My flashlight was still gripped in my palm. It cast stretching shadows across the damp walls. I imagined them down here before I arrived. Alone, sitting in the dark. The thought sent a shudder through me. Were they alive? Were they walking corpses? They smelled dead, but they acted alive. "Sit," she murmured. "Please." I hesitated, then slowly lowered myself into one of the chairs. The air was frigid, the kind of cold that settled deep in the bones. Everything in me screamed that I shouldn't be here. The large male stood in the corner, motionless but breathing. She shuffled into the back room, her steps wet against the concrete. Her shoulders arched forward, not from pain, but something deeper, something mechanical, like a body struggling to remember how to move. As she disappeared into the shadows, I turned toward another room across from me. The door was shut. Moving carefully, I rose from my chair, cautious not to make a sound over the shifting groan of the house and the storm beating its fists against the world outside. I crept toward the door, fingers wrapping around the handle. It turned easily, the door pushing open with a reluctant creak. Inside, two large dog cages sat against the far wall, their heavy metal bars rusted but still looked strong enough. Each one was locked with a heavy padlock. In the first, a mummified corpse lay crumpled in on itself, the dried remains of a young man. His clothes clung to his bones, skin pulled tight like old leather. Cobwebs stretched between his fingers, webs caught in the open gape of his jaw. Ben, their son? I didn't know for sure, but whoever he was actually dead. Unlike them. I sucked in a sharp breath, stomach tightening as I clamped a hand over my mouth. The sound of her footsteps stopped. I held still. The silence stretched, pressing into my ears. Then a shift, a tilt of the head. The man's ear turned slightly, angling toward me like a dog picking up a distant sound. My heart slammed against my ribs. There was a second kennel. Empty. Why? For me? I waited, breath caught in my throat, forcing myself not to move. His head cocked slightly, listening, but then he returned to his stillness. The vacant slits in his head reminded me of something I remember hearing about. How the eyes are the first thing that carrion insects consume when you die. Because of how soft they are. Was that what happened to them? Her feet resumed their slow, wet shuffle in the back room. Moving carefully, I tiptoed back to the chair, lowering myself into it, hands curled into fists beneath the table. She reemerged a moment later, glancing in my direction. She carried a tray and set it down in front of me. Rusted cans of beans, corn, radishes, and other fruits and vegetables sat in a row. The metal was dented, lids peeled open, their edges rimmed with dried blood. Deep grooves from human teeth marked the sides of each can. Inside, a black soup sloshed thickly, rancid and rotting. Come, Harold. Seat. It's dinner time. He moved toward the table, dragging the pitchfork beside him. The prongs carved shallow tracks through the damp sludge on the floor. With a deep groan, he dropped into the chair next to me. They ate slowly, deliberately. Fingers dipped into the cans, scooping up the tar-like slop, shoving it between their lips. Chewing, sucking, swallowing. That shouts. Their hollow eyes never left me. A thick dribble of black ichor leaked from the ragged hole in his trachea, soaking into the filth on his overalls. He didn't react. The chewing grew louder, lips smacking, cracked teeth grinding. The sick, organic sounds filled the room, drowning out the storm outside. He was too close. His shoulder brushed mine as he hunched over his meal. She sat to my right, her rotted fingers stirring the sludge in her can. Eat. Got to eat. Keep your strength up. She nudged a can toward me. Pickled yams. The smell hit me instantly. Sweetness turned sour. Something squirmed in the black slop. I hesitated, swallowing against the bile rising in my throat. My fingers curled around the rusted can. I took a slow breath and pretended to slurp at it. The smell alone was enough to turn my stomach. But worse was the sight of them, their pale hands working the sludge, their mouths smacking greedily around the rotten pulp of canned fruit and vegetables. The rancid odor of botulism. She leaned in close. I know you ain't been. I could feel my eyes widen with terror. As she spoke, black droplets splattered onto my sleeve. My heart thumped hard against my ribs. Her lips furled into a smile. I know you saw Ben. In there. She motioned toward the other room. Ben tried to leave, tried to go to that university. But we had work to do here. So much to do on the farm. Something writhed beneath her scalp, just like in the cans. A yellowed maggot fell from her forehead, wriggling on the table. A bright, searing heat burned in my lungs. I needed to leave. To run. Now. We couldn't let Ben go. We needed him here. With us. She smiled, her mouth a black, oozing void. I watched the maggot writhe in a slow circle. Ben wasn't a survivor. Wasn't built tough. He stopped working the fields, even after we whipped him. Broke his ankle. Let it heal all wrong, so he could wander the property without hobbles. Nothing taught the boy discipline. So we locked him up. Harold tossed an empty can over his shoulder, belching. A sickly, rotting sweetness filled my nostrils. She chewed at a gristly piece of something. Black ichor dribbled down her chin. He stopped moving in there. Couldn't take it. Weak boy. Even Harold and me outlasted him. She reached for my hand, fingers thin and stringy like piano wires. The flesh was damp, her grip cold and clammy like a wet fish. Her cracked nails scraped against my skin. Harold and me, we tried making more babies, they just kept coming out all wrong. Buried him deep in the fields. I sat frozen, my mind clawing for sense, for some kind of reality to latch onto. None of this was right. None of this should have been possible. But her touch, deliberate and real, left no room for doubt. Then you come along, wandering onto our farm. A strong young man. Her grip tightened, fingers locking around my wrist. You could be the son we deserved. Just need to make a few things clear first. A blur of movement. Harold shot up from his seat. Before I could react, the pitchfork slammed down hard on my left hand. The middle barb punched clean through. A gunshot of pain exploded through my body. Oh fuck, oh fuck, I screamed, falling to my knees. I yanked my right hand free from her grip, her nails tearing at my skin. God damn it, I roared, grasping wildly at the pitchfork's handle. It had been buried deep. The three prongs jutted all the way through the underside of the table, my blood trickling from the tips. Grabbed the leg irons. Harold. I scrambled to my knees, but she only watched, head tilted, listening, that same sick grin stretching her face. Harold's heavy footsteps thudded across the floor, steady, patient, knowing there was nowhere for me to go. If I got those shackles on me, I'd end up like Ben. I'd end up in that cage. My flashlight lay on the ground, its weak beam the only thing keeping the room from total darkness, the same darkness they moved through like blind, naked moles. I lunged for the pitchfork handle, wrenching at it with my free hand, but it wouldn't budge. He'd driven it too deep. I climbed onto the table, bracing my legs against its edge, and pulled, every muscle straining, my breath coming in ragged gasps. "Stop it! Or I'll put you in that dog cage right now," she hissed, sensing what I was doing, her ruined fingers twitching against the table. I pulled harder, veins bulging in my arms, jaw locked tight, my whole body on fire, the wound in my hand screaming as I put every ounce of strength into the handle. The door creaked before me. Harold was coming. I heard the clank of manacles swinging in his hands, his body a shadow moving without urgency, knowing he didn't have to rush. I pulled. My teeth began to ache. The pitchfork gave way all at once. I staggered back, the table pitching forward beneath my weight, slamming down onto her arm with a grotesque pop, nearly tearing it from the socket. She made no sound, no scream of pain, only the raspy noise of her breathing as she lifted her head and grinned wider, her lips curling back, black ichor glistening along her gums. I hit the floor hard, my knees sinking into the slick, stinking filth, my boots sliding as I struggled to stand. I had seconds, maybe less. If I didn't move now, I wouldn't get another chance. I bolted toward the door, slipping, catching myself, my pulse hammering in my throat. I heard Harold behind me, moving faster now, charging like a bull, the walls shuddering with his weight. I lunged past my flashlight and wrenched open the storm cellar, throwing my body into it just as his hand shot through the gap. There was no sound, just the awful, meaty crunch as his hand was crushed between the jagged nails on the board that once held the heavy door shut. I watched, frozen, as his fingers flexed once, twice, the raw skin peeling apart, flesh splitting open, dragging slowly backward through the rusted nails and back into the storm cellar, tearing deep, splitting apart the hand like a ship grinding over a reef. The ruined digits disappeared into the cellar with a thump. I stood there, breathless, chest heaving, rain pounding against the earth outside. God, were they? Were they even people anymore? I rushed toward the barn, feet pounding through the mud, breath burning in my throat. The storm cellars tore open behind me when I was halfway across. I didn't look back, but I heard the splintering wood, the slap of bare feet in the rain. The earth was a mess of deep puddles now, the hail softening into a relentless downpour, soaking through my clothes as I pushed forward. The barn loomed ahead, red and peeling, the place where all of this began. I turned. Through the dark and the rain, I saw them. His massive frame, her hunched, twisted silhouette. They were coming, slow but sure, drawn to the sound of me even over the storm. I had to get my pack. Everything I owned, every piece of my life was in there. Without it, I was as good as dead. Even if it meant risking more, losing more, I had to retrieve it. I reached the barn and yanked the door shut behind me, but the latch was useless, broken on the floor. No way to keep them out. I climbed into the loft, shoving my gear into my pack as fast as my shaking hand allowed. They were close now. I buried myself in a pile of soiled hay, curled tight, pulling more over me, barely breathing. "Should 'a' hobbled you the second I saw you," she muttered from below. The tension coiled tight, a wire stretched to its breaking point. You wouldn't be able to follow me up here, too big, too heavy, but she could. I heard her hands scrabbling against the rungs of the ladder, her feet clumsy as she climbed. The wood groaned under her weight. Then there was a wet, uneven shuffle. She was on all fours now, crawling across the loft, sifting through the hay. I held my breath. She was inches away, close enough that I could make out the thin, cracked line of her lips, the way they barely covered the dark gums beneath. Close enough that the stink of her clung to the air, thick with the sweetness of decay. I heard her tongue move inside her mouth, restless, shifting. Her ruined hand, swollen and trembling, dropped into the straw beside my leg. A strand of spit dangled from her lips. I felt it land on my shirt. I forced my eyes shut, clenched my teeth, willed my body to stay still even as my muscles burned with the need to move. My leg cramped hard, but I swallowed the pain, the panic. She sniffed once. Her fingers curled into the straw. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. The smell of her filled my mouth, my lungs, the back of my throat. Then she shifted, stilled, decided. and she retreated, crawling back down the ladder without a word. I stayed frozen, barely daring to breathe, listening as they rifled through the stalls below, kicking through piles of garbage and rotted hay. I waited, long after she left, long after I heard his heavy boots drag away. 30 minutes, an hour, maybe more. Only when the rain stopped and the first thin light pushed through the slats of the barn did I move. I slipped down, careful, silent, my wounded hand throbbing deep in my bones. I noticed no birds chirped, no crickets called, no frogs croaked. The land was eerie in its silence, dead in its stillness, cursed, poisoned. For a moment, I almost convinced myself none of it had happened, that these things were just delusions, paranoia brought on by exhaustion and old habits clawing at the edges of my mind. But as I crept out of the barn, I saw the soil trampled by many footprints. Some were mine, most were not. If you're a fellow drifter, if you ever pass an abandoned red barn in the middle of nowhere, keep on walking. That's it for today's creepy Reddit tales. Before we go, I just want to say a quick thanks to all of you for watching, liking, and sticking around. You guys keep this channel going, and I'll be back soon with more stories that'll make your skin crawl. Drop a comment if you've got your own spooky tale to share, and I'll see you in the next one.